Good afternoon and welcome to BBC News. The former Labour Cabinet Minister, Dame Tessa Jowell, who campaigned to raise awareness of brain cancer following her diagnosis a year ago, has died. She was 70. A leading light in Tony Blair's government, Tessa Jowell was also instrumental in bringing the Olympics to London in 2012. This morning, Mr Blair praised her courage and dignity in publicly confronting her cancer, saying her efforts to raise awareness were a lasting tribute to a lifetime of public service. Leila Nathu looks back at her life.
At the Games of the 30th Olympiad in 2012 are awarded to the City of London.
The words they wanted to hear. London had won the contest to host the 2012 Olympics, and it was Tessa Jowell who championed the bid from the start.
I am Tessa Jowell, Olympic Minister.
She went on to oversee preparations for the Games.
We can see the roof of the aquatics.
And laid the foundations for the capital's greatest sporting event.
Tessa Jane Helen Douglas Jowell.
Tessa Jowell was first elected to Parliament in 1992 in the South London seat of Dulwich, after spending time as a social worker and counsellor. She was then one of just 60 female MPs in the Commons. A New Labour stalwart, Tessa Jowell was a popular figure in all circles, but was one of Tony Blair's strongest supporters.
Her impact on politics was enormous. Everything she touched, she turned to gold in some way, whether it was advancing equal pay for women, starting Sure Start, which was an immense programme for children in our country, or of course bringing the Olympics to Britain. And she did everything with the same passion, determination, verve, ability and charm.
After spells as public health and then education minister, she joined the cabinet in 2001 as culture secretary, overseeing the relaxation of gambling and licensing laws and persuading her colleagues to back the Olympic pitch. Tessa Jowell continued to serve on Labour's front bench under Gordon Brown, and after the party lost power in 2010. She left the Commons in 2015 and stood to be Labour's candidate for London Mayor, though she lost out to Sadiq Khan. Not long after entering the House of Lords, Lady Jowell revealed she'd been diagnosed with a brain tumour. She later gave a moving speech to peers about her condition.
In the end, what gives a life meaning is not only how it is lived, but how it draws to a close.
Dame Tessa Jowell, who's died at the age of 70. Well, tributes have been pouring in, particularly across social media. We'll just take a look at some of those. And Conservative MP Anna Soubry tweeted, Dame Tessa leaves a remarkable legacy. Right to the end, she campaigned in the interests of other people. Nicky Morgan has said, very sorry to hear about the death of Tessa Jowell. She was a brave and dedicated campaigner to the very end of her life and an inspiration to aspiring female MPs on all sides of the political debate. Her daughter-in-law, Ella Woodward, tweeted, I've never seen love like I have since becoming part of their family. Thank you for teaching us all so much about love, kindness, optimism and courage. The bravery you showed this past year was like nothing I have ever seen. And David Beckham has posted this image on his Instagram account saying, such sad news this morning, losing Dame Tessa, who was a passionate and amazing woman in so many different ways and will be missed by so many. Well, the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, has also been speaking about her legacy.
I think in government, pushing for Sure Start, which made such a difference to so many children's lives, the idea that all of our children can achieve things together and you bring the family in as well. So it's that sense of community that she brought to it. And I think that is one of the greatest achievements. The other was working with a very wide range of people to help bring the Olympics to London and see it all the way through. And I've never forgotten her speaking really earnestly at a meeting of the Parliamentary Labour Party about how well we were going to do at Taekwondo. I'm pretty sure that 99% of the people in the room hadn't got a clue what Taekwondo was, but she said it with such conviction. She said, yes, absolutely, very good. So she had this great determination on sport. And you look at this playing field we're at now, young kids out on a Sunday morning playing football. That's a good legacy.
Well, as Jeremy Corbyn explained there, one of the major policy reforms Tessa Jowell worked on, which she had described as her greatest achievement, was Sure Start, the national childcare programme. Well, we can now speak to the former director of Sure Start, Naomi Eisenstadt. Thank you for joining us today. Your thoughts initially on the loss of Dame Tessa?
Well, I'm tremendously sad. Tessa made an incredible contribution to Sure Start, but also as someone who entered the civil service to do Sure Start, having never been a civil servant before, I was absolutely terrified. And what I valued most was her incredible kindness to me, her encouragement to me, her willingness to help me through what was a very difficult, what could have been a very difficult transition from the voluntary sector into government. I mean, my best quote of Tessa's was, "I want to smell the babies." She so wanted it to be about mothers, fathers, and babies. And I think we achieved that because of Tessa.
What do you think that she brought to that role?
Well, it's interesting because, of course, she had a social work background, but she also understood that just because you're living in poverty, it doesn't mean that you're not a good parent and don't want to be a good parent. So her attitude towards Sure Start, and indeed, she was very close with David Blunkett, and Tessa and David worked brilliantly with Sure Start together about bringing community together, reducing social isolation. So she brought a social work feel, but not about family dysfunction, much more about family support.
You've described there the support that you received from her. Is this something that you saw throughout her career as you watched it, her supportive role towards women, other women?
Well, funnily enough, I mean, I was thinking, again, remembering the Treasury official, also who sadly died some years ago, Norman Glass, saying there's very few ministers for whom I have a jump in my step when I'm about to see her. So it wasn't just for women, it was for men as well. She just worked beautifully with us and was, at the one hand, incredibly supportive, on the other hand, very clear about what she wanted to achieve. And that's what you want from a minister.
Did she keep in touch once she'd moved on?
Well, yes, when in two ways, you know, relatively recently, the last few years, when Tessa was hoping to be the Labour mayoral candidate for London, she and I were meeting frequently about how we would design a childcare system for London. And also, her daughter was very involved in work with refugees, and particularly refugee children, and asked me for advice on what's the best way to do that. So we did meet the last few years.
Okay. She spoke very passionately about Sure Start. There was a recent, or rather a number of years ago, an article in the Guardian newspaper where she said, you know, I think it was my proudest achievement. Is that something that she continued to speak about?
Oh, yes. I mean, in the sense that when she was thinking about being Mayor of London, it was to, so how would we recreate Sure Start for London? And certainly there was a review of childcare for Lambeth and Southwark that Tessa chaired, and I was on that review. So she continued her interest in early childhood when she was in the House of Lords, and I welcomed the opportunity to continue working with her on it.
We're hearing a lot about her loyalty and her common touch. What was she actually like to work with at close quarters?
Fantastic. Just, you know, very warm, very friendly, and, you know, just really silly things like the first big conference we had that David Blunkett was speaking at, and Gordon Brown was speaking at, and Tessa, of course, was speaking, and Patricia Hollis. We had a whole lineup of ministers, and I was completely terrified. And as Tessa got out of the ministerial car, the first thing she said to me was, "Naomi, you look gorgeous." And that just sort of reduced all my fear in a second. So she just knew exactly what to say at the right moment. And as I say, although I entered the civil service in mid-career, I wasn't young. I was very nervous, and Tessa was incredibly helpful.
We hear a lot about her steely determination, particularly in pushing through London's bid for the Olympics. Did you see that steely determination in operation?
Well, certainly I saw it in her attitude towards babies and young children. And of course, because my contact with her was very much about children and children's issues, I didn't realize the sort of sport connection. So I was rather surprised and then astounded and impressed with, with her commitment to both.
OK. Naomi Eisenstadt, former director of Sure Start, thank you very much for sharing your memories of Dame Tessa Jowell.
Thank you. I welcomed the opportunity. I really loved her.
Thank you. So remembering there Dame Tessa Jowell, who has passed away at the age of 70. And we have got some breaking news concerning the two Britons that were kidnapped a number of days ago in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which was in the Virunga National Park, just along the border there with Rwanda and Uganda. We are getting some news that concerning those two Britons kidnapped. Just to bring you that in a moment, a little bit of confirmation for you. We understand that they have been released. We'll bring you more on that in a moment. Do stay with us here on BBC News. I'll bring more shortly, just a few details to confirm. Now, at least 10 people have been killed and more than 40 injured in bomb attacks on 3 churches in Indonesia. Police say the attacks were carried out by the members of one family, including 4 children, one a girl aged 9, who blew themselves up at the sites. Rebecca Henschke reports.
A wave of blasts, timed and coordinated to hit those coming to Sunday Mass. Authorities say the work of one family. The mother with 2 daughters blew herself up at one church, the father and sons at the other 2.
From our information from the East Java Provincial Police, there are 3 churches so far which were attacked on Diponegoro Street, Arjuna Street and in the Gebang area.
Indonesia's intelligence agency says Islamic State-inspired group Jemaah Ansarul Daulah, or JAD, is believed to be behind the bombings. Today's church attacks come just days after police ended a riot and hostage-taking by convicted terrorists at a maximum security facility outside of the capital, Jakarta. 5 police officers were killed by the inmates in the 36-hour-long siege, sparking the president to call for calm.
I need to emphasise that the nation and all the people are never afraid and will never give the slightest room to terrorism, and also to efforts to undermine the security of the country.
Indonesia is largely a tolerant, pluralist nation, but there is concern about rising intolerance. Rebecca Henschke, BBC News, Jakarta.
OK, more details coming to us now about the release of the 2 hostages in the Virunga National Forest in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The British ambassador to the DRC has tweeted saying 2 Britons kidnapped in Virunga have been released unharmed thanks to the DRC authorities, particularly the ICCN and the Virunga authorities for all their efforts. Goes on to say delighted at their release, but our thoughts remain with Virunga staff who lost a brave colleague. That colleague, from memory, was a ranger that was travelling with the party. And Boris Johnson, Foreign Secretary, has also issued a statement saying, I'm delighted to announce that 2 British nationals who were held hostage in the Democratic Republic of Congo have been released. He goes on to pay tribute to the authorities, the DRC authorities and the Congolese Institute for Nature Conservation for their tireless help during this terrible case. And just to conclude this statement, it goes on to say, my thoughts are now with the family of the Virunga Park Ranger, Rachel Makisa Baraka, who was killed during the kidnapping, and with the injured driver and the released British nationals as they recover from this traumatic incident. There had been incidents of other kidnappings in the area. There had been some military presence as well where this incident had taken place. So the 2 Britons, we're hearing, have been safely released unharmed. Moving on, the time is just gone 2:15. You're watching BBC News. And Theresa May says that people who supported leaving the EU will get the Brexit they voted for, and reaffirmed her commitment to Britain leaving the customs union. She's moved to reassure voters in a Sunday newspaper article as her cabinet considers two different options for our future trading relations. But this morning, whilst appearing to pay back the Prime Minister, the Environment Secretary Michael Gove admitted that he had doubts about a customs partnership with the EU, as Tom Barton now reports.
Once again, with her cabinet divided, the Prime Minister is defending her approach to Brexit, telling voters in a Sunday Times article, "You can trust me to deliver," adding on the most difficult issue, "We will leave the customs union," but acknowledging there'll have to be compromises.
The Prime Minister has laid out a very, very clear flight path for us.
Today, the Minister sent out to defend that position wasn't being very supportive. Michael Gove appearing to back comments by the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson that the Prime Minister's preferred option, a customs partnership with the EU, was crazy.
Boris pointed out that because it's novel,